Today we're unboxing a first generation 12.9 inch iPad Pro that should be running its original software version, iOS 9. Let's go ahead and get it opened up. Okay, and here is our 12.9 inch iPad Pro. This is in the gold color option, and it's actually in a case. So let's go ahead and get that removed so we can take a better look at the condition. And okay, the iPad is looking really nice so far. I don't see any scratches or noticeable wear. On the side here though, it actually looks like the iPad is slightly bent. I'm not sure if that's coming across on camera here, but it's quite noticeable in person. Aside from the bend though, I have not noticed any dents on this iPad. And you may be able to tell the iPad actually has a glass screen protector applied. Let's see if this iPad has any battery power. And yes, it does. From the boot screen, I am noticing a slight bright spot here on the display. And okay, perfect. The device boots into the iOS 9 slide to set up screen. And you can immediately identify that because iOS 9 was the last version to have the slide to unlock and slide to set up interface. So let's go ahead and do that now. And there we go, we are met with the iOS 9 home screen and a notification about updating to iOS 16, which we will definitely not be doing. Let's go into settings so we can see which version of iOS 9 we have. Okay, cool, it looks like we have 9.2.1 here. So that's about the middle of the road for iOS 9 on these iPads. I believe it launched with iOS 9.1 with the last revision being 9.3.5. And we can also see that this is a 128GB storage configuration. Since this iPad is a little bit low on battery, I want to give it some time to charge up before we go into what this iPad was. And we'll also get an Apple Pencil paired to this so we can try that out. Okay, and now that I've spent some time with this iPad, let's take a closer look at it. iOS 9 doesn't have any sort of built-in battery health report. But I connected this iPad to my Mac, and using the Coconut Battery application, I was able to find out that this has over 100% battery health. It only has 6 battery cycles with a capacity reading of over 10,000 milliamp hours. I did end up removing the screen protector that was applied to this just because there was quite a bit of dust and debris stuck under it. And I did get the Apple Pencil successfully paired. So let's talk about what this first generation 12.9 inch iPad Pro was. And this was Apple's very first iPad Pro model ever. It was announced in September 2015 at the same time as the iPhone 6s. But it was not actually released until November of that year. It launched at a price of $799. And at launch, it was available in 32 or 128GB configurations. You could choose from a silver, a space gray, or the gold color option like I have here. And one of the biggest differences for the iPad Pro was the display size. This was a 12.9 inch display with a resolution of 2732 by 2048. So compared to Apple's previous largest display iPad with the 9.7 inch iPad Air 2, you can see just how much larger the Pro was. And although this iPad was significantly larger, it still shared a basic design with the iPad Air 2 as well as the Mini 4, with the rounded corner design finished with diamond chamfered edges. It was slightly thicker than those models though, and quite a bit heavier. Apple compared the 1.57 pound weight of this iPad to the weight of the original 2010 iPad. The cameras on this iPad were pretty mid-tier for the era. So you had an 8 megapixel rear-facing camera that was capable of recording 1080p HD video, with a 1.2 megapixel front-facing camera that was capable of recording 720p. And it had a first generation Touch ID sensor on the home button. It did not receive the second generation sensor that was much faster and had just launched on the iPhone 6s. The iPad Pro had a really nice speaker setup. It had 2 sets of stereo speakers on the top and bottom for a quad speaker layout. And those speakers really became a hallmark feature for the iPad Pro. They had internal resonance chambers built into the aluminum finished with a carbon fiber cap. And they not only provided much louder audio compared to previous iPads, it was much more of a balanced sound and it adjusted based on if you were holding it in portrait or landscape orientation. There was also a smart connector on the bottom edge of the device, and that was used for connecting to the new smart keyboard accessory. It had 3-pin contacts that were capable of transferring power and data, so there was no need to go through Bluetooth pairing or charging of external keyboards. And of course, what this iPad is probably most known for is being the first to support an Apple Pencil. And even though this was the first generation Apple Pencil, it was still really advanced. I'll go into notes here so I can show you some of those features. So the pencil would draw differently based on your tilt. So with a very extreme angle, you'll see that it was a very thick line. But as I tilt the pencil more toward a 90-degree angle, the lines become thinner. And the pencil was also pressure sensitive, so as you would press harder, the lines would become darker. This was really great for doing things like calligraphy. Apple's Notes application was a bit limited at the time, but you could get external apps like Notability to take better advantage of the pencil. Applications like this were really great for taking notes. And with applications like Procreate, the Apple Pencil was really cool for artists. There were some downfalls to this pencil though. For one, it actually charged with lightning. So you could either use an adapter to charge this, or otherwise you would have to plug the pencil straight into your iPad itself. But even if you would charge the pencil with an adapter, you were required to plug it into the device like this for the initial pairing process. This became so much better with the second generation Apple Pencil in 2018. It would charge and pair wirelessly by simply connecting to the side of the iPad magnetically. And comparing the original iPad Pro here to my personal iPad Pro, which is the 2020 12.9-inch model, you can see that the newer models went away from the larger bezels with a home button. That change happened with the 2018 iPad Pro models. But getting back to this iPad Pro, it was powered by an A9X processor. And this was a dual-core processor clocked at around 2.26 gigahertz, which is a bit interesting because the previous flagship iPad, the Air 2, had a 3-core processor. But even though this A9X was down a core, it was still faster than the A8X. In some of the benchmark tests at the time, it could actually outscore certain models of the 2015 Retina MacBook. And this was the first iOS device to be paired to 4 gigabytes of RAM, which was just a huge amount, especially for the time and running iOS 9. This was the only iPad Pro in Apple's lineup for around 4 months until they launched the 9.7-inch iPad Pro in March of 2016. But that 9.7-inch model wasn't just a scaled-down version of this, it actually brought some new features. It of course kept the Apple Pencil support as well as the quad speaker layout, but it added a True Tone display with P3 color support. And the display also had an improved anti-reflective coating compared to this 12.9-inch model. It had much improved cameras as well, which were pretty much pulled from the iPhone 6S. So it had a raised camera bump on the back with a 12 megapixel sensor. It also had an improved 5 megapixel front-facing camera. With the launch of the 9.7-inch model, Apple updated the 12.9-inch to have a new 256 gigabyte storage configuration. And also, this is a really small detail, but they also updated the iPad text printed on the back. So models made after March 2016 had a much thinner font, while the earlier models like I have here have a thicker font. This iPad was sold until June 2017 when it was replaced with the second generation 12.9-inch. That model updated the cameras, the processor, and most importantly gave it the ProMotion display. And that 120Hz display would become a staple for the iPad Pro lineup. So now let's talk about iOS 9 on this iPad specifically. First off, iOS 9 had an all-new system-wide font. So this was known as San Francisco, and it was an Apple in-house design font. Previously, with iOS 8 and older, Apple had been using the Helvetica Neue font, which you might be able to tell the difference here. It's a bit hard to explain, but basically Helvetica Neue kind of has more pointy edges, while the San Francisco font tends to be a lot more rounded. There was this enhanced keyboard for the 12.9-inch iPad Pro on iOS 9. So your numbers and symbol row across the top would remain. And also, of course, it was just larger and felt more like typing on a real physical keyboard. iOS 9 brought some nice multitasking features to iPad. So you could do slide over, And as the name suggests, this would give you a small slide over view of another application that you could then swipe out of the way if you wanted to. Using this toggle though, you could change slide over into split view, which would allow you to work in two applications at once. And that could also be resized as well. There was also picture-in-picture mode for videos that was new in iOS 9. And the regular multitasking view was changed in iOS 9 as well. So you now had these application cards that went to the left instead of the right. And while this was nice, I've always kind of preferred the iOS 8 multitasking view instead. Let's take a look at the default wallpaper selection here on iOS 9. So you had this dynamic category which would offer you different colors with these bokeh dots that would kind of move according to the tilt of your device. And you also had your selection of stills. And there were 24 here to choose from that were kind of grouped into these categories of 3. This blue and orange kind of sand look was the default. I decided to go with this beige and blue sand for the gold iPad just because I thought it looked really incredible with the color. I don't love the iOS 9 wallpaper selection nearly as much as iOS 8 though. I do think these black background wallpapers though would look really nice on a space gray iPad. Let's see what Siri looks like here on iOS 9. Tell me a joke.
Okay, this one's a little bit punny. I could tell you the one about the broken pencil, but never mind. It's pointless.
And there we go. Ironically, we get a joke about a pencil. Maybe it's talking about the Apple Pencil here. But Siri looks pretty cool here on iOS 9. It's kind of these rainbow colors that continuously blur across the screen. And the App Store actually works really well on iOS 9 too. I was able to go in through this purchase tab and log into my account and then download past versions of tons of applications. I got a lot of classic games as well as some iLife and iWork applications, and these have been really fun to play around with. This Notability app is definitely the best for the Apple Pencil on this version, but the 12.9-inch display has also been really cool for playing games. This iPad received software support through iOS 16 in 2022, and that version actually just received a security update in March of 2025. So as we're coming toward the conclusion for this video, I feel like this iPad may be taking the slot as my favorite legacy iOS device. There's something just incredibly nostalgic about having the old school slide to unlock feature on this huge 12.9-inch display. As well as the white display bezels, I really love to see these on older Apple products. And having the first iPad to support the Apple Pencil is just so cool, as the Pencil really changed what the iPad means to its users. And although this iPad did spark the whole "is it an iPad, is it a computer" controversy, the iPad Pro really holds a special place in my heart. I always lusted after them back when they were new, and I was finally able to purchase one for myself back in 2020. It was incredibly useful to me during my college years for taking notes. And I still love using it every day for watching videos and shopping for old Apple devices on eBay. So leave me a comment below with your thoughts on this iPad, iOS 9, or just the iPad Pro in general. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.